Well, like every other issue, we have some control measures. For example, we have access control handled by creating user accounts and passwords. To control the access of users to the system, we can uh, define user accounts, passwords, etc. For inference control, I will give the example later. Inference control for statistical databases, I will give you the example later, maybe in next session, because it's a little complicated. Um, but I will give you, I just here, I give you a brief definition of the inference control. Sometimes you don't have, you don't have access, you don't give access to a user to see the records data in a file. But you give the user the access or the rights to have, uh, for example, aggregation functions. For example, you give the user the access to see the statistics of the records. For example, sum of something or average or maximum, minimum. You have several functions in query languages. For example, in SQL, you have some functions like sum, average, maximum, and minimum, etc. We use them to have uh, brief, for example, or statistics of records or database. Sometimes a user doesn't have access to the real records, to the actual records, physical records in the database, but the user has access to these functions. And using these functions, one after another, he or she can have access to the main reports. I will give the example later. As I said before, it's a little complicated, so I have an example later in the, in, I think the other file. And we have flow control. I have the full description of all of this in next session. Flow control means prevents information from flowing to unauthorized user. Sometimes the user doesn't have access to the information, but the user has access to another data, for example, or um, another database or another information, and um, with some kind of tricks, the user can have access to main information. For example, in discriminatory mechanism, actually. For example, user 1 has access to table 1. Then user 1 give access, it's a simple example actually. User 1 give the rights, the privileges that user 1 has, give his own privileges to the another user. For example, admin of the system defines some access control and defines that user 1 can have access to table 1. Then user 2 gives this access to user 3. So indirectly, information of table 1 can be read by user 3. Actually, we can manage this, but sometimes it can be happen. So the information can flow, can move from one place to another place, for example, and eventually goes to an unauthorized user. And data encryption, ciphering, for example, coding data, used to protect sensitive transmitted data. One of the most important things that we should consider um, in security is network. You know that network is a very sensitive point. Many of the threats, many of the hacks happen in the network. When there is no network, there is no hack. Many times, many situations. So it's very important that when we are sending sensitive data or critical data from one place to another place, first we code the data, encrypt the data, then transmit data. So if in the network another person can see the data, he cannot decrypt, or she cannot decrypt data and cannot have access to main data. Nowadays, today you use cloud as cloud computing or cloud for saving your information. You can have Office, Word, PowerPoint, any of this in the cloud. So you can send your documents to cloud to save here. You can store all the pictures, photos of you, and the information, documents of you to you can send and store them in the cloud. It's very important to protect your data from any unauthorized attack and access to the information. So the best way is to encrypt data and then send them anywhere. Here we have database security and DBA. DBA, we mean database admin or administrator. Central authority for administrating database system. It's one person or a group of persons who administrating database system, and it may be one person or group that are super user or system account. DBA privileged commands are account creation. The admin of system can create an account, can grant privilege. The admin of system can grant privilege. For example, admin can say that user 1 can have access to table 1. User 1 can change the information but cannot delete. Or user 1 can insert information but cannot select information. There are many kind of access to different tables. And DBA can define these privileges. As a user here, mostly we are not talking about the end user. In this system, in the university, we are end user. But some of the users are sophisticated users, expert users. For example, the person or the group or the company that have written the application of the university. They have also access